All right, class. I wasn't able to finish our lecture today on leadership, so I'm going to go ahead and do that here in this quick 5-minute video. So we finished off talking about transformational leadership. So I want to go ahead and pick up where I left off. So basically, when we think about transformational leadership, this is a perspective on leadership that looks at the vision of the leader. And it also looks at this idea that leadership should be kind of focused on the idea that leaders can bring about change within organizations. So looking at individual characteristics within leaders that kind of bring about changes in the organization's culture and moving beyond transactional leadership characteristics and behaviors and doing more transformational types of behaviors. So we often see transformational leadership activities and behaviors going on when we're trying to bring an organization through a change process. So part of this is trying to create a vision or an image of the future of the organization that brings about a change process. So the 4 key behaviors that transformational leaders often engage in involve what we call inspirational motivation, idealized influence. This is the charismatic element. Individualized consideration, and intellectual stimulation. So the 4 I's of transformational leadership. So keep these 4 I's in mind when you think about what transformational leaders do. So first part of this, inspirational motivation, you find a way to get people motivated in a way that kind of brings them above their normal state of being, right? So I've got this vision that inspires you to do something above and beyond, right? That's what the inspirational motivation is supposed to be all about. The idealized influences, there's something special about me as a leader, and you buy into that, and you are excited about that, and you want to do this new thing with me, right? So there's something about me as a person that is charismatic or magnetic, and you like that, and because you like that, you move forward with me in this process. Individualized consideration is this kind of idea that because we're trying to do things differently and I treat you as someone who is important and part of this process, you are going to kind of consider the interactions that we have with one another as something meaningful and special, and you're going to feel like part of these interactions that we have are meaningful to you on an individual level. And then lastly, this idea that you as an individual are being stimulated at an intellectual level. So you are able to move above and beyond and do things with me as your leader that you couldn't have done by yourself. And of course, we've seen a lot of research that argues that really big kinds of leaders are able to use these kinds of behaviors to do meaningful changes in organizations. So this is kind of a newer form of leadership research that's taken place in recent years. Now, a big element of transformational leadership is this idea of charisma. So a lot of people have looked into this notion of charismatic leadership, and indeed the second element of transformational leadership is the idea of charisma. So just a little bit more background on the notion of charisma. So charisma is this interpersonal attraction that individuals tend to have for people at an individual level. So we talked about referent power as one of the power bases that individuals can have to influence others. So charisma is kind of a form of referent power. So it's like this idea that we have magnetic personalities, right? Something about us draws others to us. We're attractive to others. We are able to use our attractive nature to get people to follow us in a certain way. And usually charismatic leaders have a lot of confidence, right? They kind of exude this feeling of power, and people are very excited when they listen to them, and they feel a lot of uh, of 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 loyalty, and they really want to follow these individuals. It's very, very powerful. And of course, this is this is kind of emblematic in the way that charismatic leaders are able to communicate. They're really good at communicating, right? So they set out and communicate the vision that they have. They put out these high expectations. They talk about the kinds of things that they want to accomplish, and they're good at setting kind of these role modeling behaviors typically. So they set out these expectations, they role model what they want to do, they energize people, they get people really excited, they build a lot of confidence, they get other people to support them, maybe even empathize with them. And through their confidence and maybe even their dominance or domineering personalities, people kind of believe in that, they buy into it, and they kind of get this idea that, okay, I think this person knows what they're doing, I'm willing to follow them, I think that we're going to go places because this person seems to really kind of know what's going on here. So because of that, they tend to command a lot of loyalty, and their followers really believe that they're gonna achieve great things. Now, the problem with charismatic leadership is that sometimes charismatic leaders don't always have the best intentions, right? So charismatic leaders can have ethical motives, and sometimes they can have unethical motives. So what do I mean by that? So if you kind of look at this next slide here, I've got a chart. You look at an ethical versus an unethical charismatic. So when it comes to these different types of behaviors that a charismatic leader can engage in, I've got this idea of creating a vision. An ethical charismatic leader will really try to develop their own kind of vision and not want to get anybody else's input. It's all about them. It's all about their own ideas, and they don't really care about anybody else's wants or needs or desires or hopes, right? It's all about their own personal agenda. That's what an unethical charismatic will do. An ethical charismatic will actually listen to other folks, right? Similar types of issues when it comes to feedback. Ethical charismatics will take feedback. They'll learn from criticism. Unethical charismatics, these are the narcissists, right? They have the big egos. They just want the attention. They just listen to the people that are telling them what they want to hear, right? They don't want the candid feedback. These are the ones that they don't care, right? And you can see by some of these other examples I have on here, moral standards. Ethical charismatics, they live by a code of ethics. They have principles. They have a virtue systems. They have integrity. They have courage. They have a sense of fairness or justice. Unethical charismatics, it's only about self-interest. They just want to manipulate other people to pursue their own self-gratification agenda, right? It's all about power for power's sake, for their own personal gratification. Now, just as an example, I thought I'd show you a couple of examples of an ethical, or what I would consider an ethical charismatic individual versus an unethical charismatic individual. So, first of all, got what I would consider an ethical charismatic.
You already are the oldest president in history, and some of your staff say you were tired after your most recent encounter with Mr. Mondale. I recall yet that President Kennedy had to go for days on end with very little sleep during the Cuba Missile Crisis. Is there any doubt in your mind that you would be able to function in such circumstances?
Not at all, Mr. Truitt, and I want you to know that also I will not make age an issue of this campaign. I am not going to exploit, for political purposes, my opponent's youth and inexperience. If I still have time, I might add, Mr. Truitt, I might add that it was Seneca or it was Cicero, I don't know which, that said, if it was not for the elders correcting the mistakes of the young, there would be no state.
So you kind of see right here what I'm talking about, this idea that the ethical charismatic uses their charm and their personality to engage others and communicate a positive message. This is the example of the unethical charismatic, right? This is Mussolini.
Non sia il carcere che umilia il nostro vigore di vita.
All right, so Mussolini, he's a dictator in Italy, 1930s, 1940s, working up that crowd. Mussolini did some really bad things in Italy leading up to World War II, so probably don't have to get into too much detail about some of the stuff that he was involved in. Not a good guy. Just leave it at that. Not a good guy. All right, moving on. Now, what are some of the things that transformational leaders engage in? They have a vision, right? They have a goal, they have an idea, they want to accomplish something. Usually it's very attention grabbing, and they're good at communicating it, and they're good at creating this image in the people that follow them, their minds. They're able to help them to see that, and then people are willing to go after that, right? So they're good also at building trust and finding ways to get people on board. And of course, transformational leaders are also ethical charismatics. So that means that they've got integrity and ethics behind them. So they build a lot of trust along the way. And they also are willing to accept criticism, right? So they have positive self-regard. They learn from mistakes. They understand that they have strengths, they have weaknesses, and that they are able to build and develop their talents. They know how to learn from their failures along the way. So that's another positive from this whole perspective of transformational leadership theories and approaches. All right, so what is this that we can potentially learn as managers and leaders moving forward? Hopefully, we can use some of these ideas about transformational leadership to improve performance at both the individual and the group level. Maybe we can use it to train our employees a little bit better, but keeping in mind that we need to have ethics, because if we're going to try to use these types of approaches, try to use charismatic behaviors, try to engage these idealized influence and inspirational motivation types of techniques, it needs to be with a strong ethical mindset involved. We talked about the importance of ethics several times in this material already. Now, boss says sales are dropping like a rock. Our plan is to invent some sort of doohickey that everyone wants to buy. Boss tells Dilbert, visionary leadership work is done. How long will your part take? I don't know. I don't think that that's what I would call very visionary leadership. I think Dilbert's got his work cut out for him. All right. So, if you're going to be an ethical leader, if you're going to be a transformational leader, the kinds of things that you have to worry about, obviously, as we've discussed before, this is again straight out of your text, you got to think about that code of ethics. You've got to have a clear understanding of what it is that you as an organization are going to follow, enforce, who you're going to recruit, who you're going to bring in, the kinds of things that you want to have as an organization, and what you're going to enforce as an organization. What is it that you want to do, how you're going to treat your employees, what kinds of things that you want to invest in from a value system or from an ethics system. So, and of course, we talked already in the last couple of chapters about the importance of, maybe bringing diversity in as a form of values and making sure that you appreciate that our society, our culture, and our customers are increasingly becoming more and more diverse. So it's important that our employees reflect that if we're going to be successful moving forward. So maybe identifying, rewarding, praising people who exemplify the kind of conduct that is highly ethical, highly moral, highly praiseworthy is probably pretty important. So just kind of wrapping this material up, obviously leadership is important, leadership is meaningful, leadership is a big part of management, one of the 4 functions of management. And if you're going to be a good leader, you have to be courageous, right? seeing things for what they are, not hiding, not sticking your head in the sand, being constructive in your criticism, not being destructive in how you communicate with others, persisting through criticism, because as a leader, you will be criticized, no matter what. Good leaders are criticized, bad leaders are criticized. Good leaders accept the criticism and move forward. Bad leaders crumble under criticism, right? So, recent film that came out, The Darkest Hour, Winston Churchill, highly recommend it. Lots of criticism that guy came under and still prevailed. Very, very, very good film about leadership. So, another example of some leadership behavior, maybe not so effective. Boss says, I'm reading The Leadership Secrets of the Famous Roman General Dogbertius. Here's a good one. Put your friends in private offices and your wretched slaves in cubicles. Here's another. Don't read this book to your wretched slaves. I think maybe he should not have read that in front of his employees. What do you guys think? Probably not. All right, why does this all matter? Obviously, it's a function of management. We got to lead as managers. If we're going to advance, we got to have some leadership skills. We've got to be able to use the power we have available to us to influence. And of course, being a leader means influencing others, getting things done through others, and we can learn how to lead. We can learn leadership behaviors, and we can potentially hone our leadership skills. So that's important. And potentially, we need to diagnose situations and figure out which skills are more useful in some situations than others. Maybe we are more prone to task leadership skills versus behavioral leadership skills. We need to figure out which one we're better at and maybe use those in the right situations, or maybe diagnose the situations that need one or the other depending on the situation. It's our job to figure out which is the right one and maybe even figure out which theory might be more useful to us depending on that situation. Again, sorry it took a little bit longer than I anticipated to finish up the material. Good luck studying for the test on Wednesday, and hopefully if you have any other further questions, you can come to the review session on Tuesday evening in room 216 of McCool.